Right. Ilan, bringing you back in. This idea, though, of Iran being China's greatest ally in the Middle East. I mean, there's people that dispute that. Lucy Greer, Esfandia Batman-Halej, they point out that despite the much vaunted, 25-year agreement between Iran and China, very little investment has come Iran's way, and the Iranians are frustrated about this. They say that Iran's value to China is massively overstated, and that China actually is concerned more about relations with Gulf nations. What do you say to that?
No, so I've heard that argument. I would say this. I think it's necessary to nest that 25-year agreement in Iranian history. So I think it's true that, this deal is mostly conceptual, but I think it's also true that up until quite recently, certainly during the Biden administration's term in office, the Iranian economy was in much better shape. The Iranians didn't have such a pressing need for Chinese investment. All of that has changed over the last year. Iran is in a much more precarious economic state. But here, I think Chinese calculations factor in as well, because what we've seen historically has been that China has been very good at triangulating between the Sunnis of the Persian Gulf, Shiite Iran, and the Jewish state of Israel. After the events of October 7th, China really made a decision, and it abandoned one prong of that three-legged stool. It became very anti-Israeli. That leaves China with Iran and Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, countries in the Sunni Gulf. And I think increasingly, if you look at Chinese rhetoric and if you look at Chinese engagement, as Iran runs into this trouble, you see China rebalancing again and rebalancing towards the Sunni Gulf, precisely because of that those oil imports that it needs, and precisely because it sees those political systems as more stable.
So Ilan, the question of, what damage has China suffered, or would it suffer with a new leader or a complete regime change in Iran?
Well, I think it depends on what the regime looks like.
If that leader then becomes pro-US and anti-China, how big a blow is that to China?
I think potentially it's a very significant blow, because it doesn't just reset the bilateral Iran-China relationship. It also resets the way the countries in Iran's immediate neighborhood interact with China, because China has managed to capitalize, I think, very dramatically on this sort of acrimony, on the suspicion, and on the security concerns that these countries have to play one side off against another. If you're looking at a new Iran that isn't an adversary to its neighbors, is not an adversary to the United States or Israel, you're looking at something much more closely resembling a consolidated bloc, and that's going to be harder for Beijing to fracture.
In terms of the upcoming Trump-Xi summit, so Donald Trump will be traveling to Beijing in April, how much of that do you think has shaped China's behavior? You said that they've only offered rhetorical support. It seems that rhetorical support has actually been softer than after Venezuela. What are China's goals ahead of that summit?
I think the main goal of the summit is to sort of reset the economic relationship between the United States and China. That's the main thing, in my opinion.
Is it being held back, restrained in its response or in its criticism of the US because of this summit?
I think it is. And I think because of the actions of the United States in Venezuela and Iran and other places, that China is trying to not add wood to the fire. And so, in effect, they might be deterred from being too reactive to what the United States is doing.
Okay. Just final question to Ilan. There's been debate, arguments online about this issue of the rhetorical support versus, actually helping out militarily Iran and Venezuela. Do you think that this reflects China's weakness and it's as simple as that? Or is it strategic design, as an analyst such as Lau Thomas says?
Right. No, I think it's more sort of broader strategic considerations, because I agree with Germán that I think, there's a long game here. There's a game of resetting the economic partnership. Remember also that for the Chinese, the future, the future dominance and future engagement in the Middle East and in other global regions doesn't begin or end with Iran. Iran is a component of this, certainly, but the Chinese, quite frankly, have bigger fish to fry. This is not true in the opposite sense, right? For the Iranians, China is the most important partner, and China doing nothing except rhetorical support, I think, really demonstrates to the Iranian leadership that they're on their own. And if the current course continues, there's no doubt that if the regime remains solvent, they're going to have to sue for peace, and to do so on terms favorable to the United States. And that, in turn, I think increases President Trump's leverage when he comes to Beijing, if he does come to Beijing in April, because he will be coming with a full head of steam. He will be coming having started to pick apart that axis that China has been spending so much time and energy building. And he also has that real world example of the fact that there is a lack of cohesion among China's allies. And that's not the case in the context of America's allies. So my sense is that China is thinking and playing a much longer game, and it's increasingly thinking beyond Iran.
Right. So does this not then still damage China's credibility, whether this is strategic design or not, if its allies cannot rely on it? I mean, Iran, Venezuela would have liked China's support.
So I think it's an interesting question. China's aid is economic first. And so this is damaging, but I don't think this is fatal to Chinese foreign policy.
Okay.